Sevgili dostlar, şimdi sabahki konuşmalarda da altı çizildi. Aslında yeni bir döneme geçiyoruz ve bu yeni dönem yeni yaşam biçimlerini de kendi çapında şekillendiriyor, hayata geçiriyor. Bizler bu yaşam alanlarını dizayn eden, bu yaşam alanlarını kurgulayan oyuncular olarak aslında bu yaşam biçimlerindeki değişimi anladıkça insanlarla mekanları, insanlarla şehirleri, insanlarla o hareketliliği bütünleştirebilen, mutlu kılan ve etkin kılan yaşam alanları oluşturabiliyoruz. O yüzden yaşam tarzlarındaki değişimi görmek çok kritik. Şimdi çok değerli bir konuşmacımız var bizimle birlikte. Geleceğin yaşam biçimlerini bize anlatacak. Ben müsaadelerinizle kendisini sahneye davet ediyorum. ULI Danimarka Ülke Başkanı ve ULI Living Concept Ürün Konseyi kurucu ortağı Sayın Jack Renteria. Please join me extending a warm welcome to Jack Renteria. Jack.
Good afternoon. My name is Jack Renteria, and today I'd like to speak a little bit about how the environments in which we live are changing. They are, of course, changing because society is changing. They are changing also because we have global megatrends that are influencing the way that we want to live. And they are also changing because we have increasingly diverse new needs from our tenants and our customers. Today, what I'd like to do is give you a little bit of an introduction of myself, and then I want to go into what are the factors, what are the drivers, and what are the megatrends that are changing the way that we want to live. And finally, I will end with a case study on Cactus Towers, which is a project on co-living in Copenhagen, Denmark, that was actually very, very provocative. It ruffled quite a few feathers, but it actually reflects the drivers and the megatrends in residential concepts. That's more or less the theme throughout the entire presentation. I'm a Canadian originally. I was born in Canada, and I then moved to Denmark 15 years ago. I'm now Danish as well, and I consider myself a Copenhagener. I actually moved to Denmark to work for 3XN Architects, a Danish architecture firm that was quite forward-thinking. And around 2017, I started hearing about a concept called co-living, which was like a community kind of living for young professionals and expats. And I thought, wow, wouldn't that have been great if I had had something like that when I moved to Copenhagen? So I started my own company where I was advising on new living concepts and worked on a project called Cactus Towers together with Catella. And I then moved to another company called Alpha Development, where we started working on build-to-rent concepts that were community-driven. And then, at the same time, I started establishing the ULI Living Concepts Product Council. That Living Concepts Product Council looked at different typologies within the residential sector. It looked at co-living, build-to-rent, multifamily. It looked at age-qualified living. This was really interesting because instead of calling it senior, we started calling it age-qualified, because after 50, there are like 5 different kinds of living concepts you can live in. We then dived into the themes. We started exploring ESG, research and data. We started realizing that we had to build an investment case. We had to look at how are the numbers coming together to make these products actually feasible. Now, one of the most important things that we really looked at were what are the drivers and the megatrends that are resulting in these new living concepts. And there are more or less 6. There's investment, demographic shifts, a growing mobile and global workforce, all of them wanting flexibility and convenience, affordability, and loneliness. Now, if we take the investment side first, this is rather interesting. You know, we all, I think, have heard the numbers that there's about 30% of all real estate investment is now going into the residential sector. This is approximately 100 billion euros every year. It's a huge amount of money. And you know, in the past, what we used to see is that the lion's share was going into office or retail, but now it's going into residential. And that means that there's a diversification of those funds across geographies and across typologies. We're starting to see more of an appetite for different kinds of living concepts. And this is kind of an interesting slide as well, because we can see that in 20 years ago, we basically had all of residential as just one line. People said, oh, are you putting your money into residential? Yep, it's just one line. 20 years later, all of those dark blue illustrate the diversification or how complex the residential sector has gotten. We also have our demographic shifts, and this is also resulting in new kinds of ways of living. Now, I love this graph because we can see 1950, 2022, and 2050. So in 1950, we really only had 8% of the population in Europe that was over age 65. When we fast forward to 2050, it's going to be 30%. And on top of that, if we take a look at the line below that, 50% of the population will be over age 50. This is starting the thinking on what do we design and build for the people that will be living across those age groups. And as I said before, now we don't call it just senior living. We call it age qualified, because from the time you're 50 to 70, it might as well be a resort that you're living in. You want convenience, you want activities and social groups. You know, as you get older, then it becomes things like assisted living, and then things like memory care. In 2022, we actually have the population more or less equally divided against the age groups. And that also means that different groups are asking for different kinds of living. This is connected to lifestyle. You know, my parents' generation, they more or less followed this model. They went to school until they were 20, then they went to work until they were 65, and then they retired. Our kids, or the new generation, is not doing this. They're staying at home longer, or once they graduate from their studies, they're going to Australia for a year, they're going to London. They are delaying their life decisions, the major life decisions of getting married or buying a house, until much, much later. That means they also have a longer working life. They're working later and they're living longer. My grandmother is 105 years old and she's still going to her afternoon dance classes in her home. I think this is really wonderful. I don't think she planned to live to 105. But we have to think about where do people live so that they can live their best lives all throughout that cycle. There's also a growing mobile and global workforce. I had the opportunity to do some research where I met with some government organizations, the Danish Confederation of Industries, Copenhagen Capacity, and International House. In Denmark, we give 20,000 internationals work permits every single year. There is a war on talent, and we are trying to attract talent in order to keep Danish companies as competitive as possible. 25% of the population in Copenhagen is non-Danish origin, and our biggest problem is housing. There is simply no place for these people to live. So when we combine that with flexibility and convenience, because they're arriving, and what they're doing is they're changing the rules of renting. To enter the rental market in Copenhagen, the standard is 3 months prepaid rent, 3 months deposit, and the current month. So that's 7 months of rent to pay for a young professional when they arrive. Now, they may have an education from Harvard or from the Bartlett in the UK or from any major university. They can do parametric modeling, but they don't have 7 months rent to pay down at once. And they don't want to pay that. They don't want to pay a deposit. They want flexibility, and they even want to be entertained in the place in which they live. We connect that with affordability. We have an interesting situation in Copenhagen. 44% of all of our households are single-person households. That's rather interesting. I've just found out that in Istanbul, your average is 3 people per household. So that's maybe a little bit better, and it prevents a little bit of loneliness, I would say. We also have checked how expensive it is to live. 25% of Copenhageners are paying 40% of their income just on their living. So this is becoming a major problem for us. What we've seen with this younger demographic that has been moving to Copenhagen, the young professionals, is they're starting to do this couch surfing. There may be 3 or 4 young people that are getting an apartment together and sharing it, even though only 2 are supposed to live there. So we're actually seeing that they're coming up with kind of their own solutions to deal with affordability. And we can't forget loneliness. This is really a big problem. The BBC did an interesting experiment. They called it the BBC Loneliness Experiment. They surveyed 50,000 people and found that 35% of adults between 25 and 35 were not just sometimes lonely, they were often or very often lonely. This is becoming a very big problem. And what we see is that people are now trying to surround themselves with other people that are like them, or that the family structure is actually changing as well. We see increasing single-parent families. We see families that are incorporating the grandparents in the family. We see families that come in every kind of configuration you can imagine. And that means that there are rather positive opportunities for new living concepts. And this is something very exciting, because real estate is changing. And I like this phrase. I really think that it's important for us to look at buildings no longer just as assets, but now as products, tailored to customer needs and preferences. And I think it's okay for us to say now that it's not just one size fits all when it comes to residential development. We can actually start thinking about who is it that we want living in our buildings, and we can design a community that is specific to them. Now, what I like to do is always take a look at these megatrends and reflect these in residential concepts. So I'd like to now show you a case study. This is Cactus Towers. The owner is Catella Corporate Finance. It's in Denmark. The architect is Bjarke Ingels, which made the project a little bit difficult to work with because it's spectacular architecture, but we had to fit everything into it. And the concept development was designed by myself, a group called Cobblestone that does facility management and building administration, and a group called Copenhagen Windows for the marketing. What we did was we discovered an untapped market. We discovered this group of young professionals and expats that nobody was catering to in Copenhagen. We went to 3 different groups. We went to the government organizations to ask, how difficult is it to attract talent to Copenhagen? Is it really actually challenging? They said, we attract a lot. The only problem is we can't keep them. We can't keep them because of loneliness issues. We can't keep them because there aren't enough places for them to stay. Eventually, they get tired of sleeping on a sofa, and they leave. And that's expensive. Because then we spoke with the companies that say, we're even willing to pay the first 3 months for them. Novo Nordisk pays the first 3 months for every new hire that they have. And that's 700 to 800 per year. They would call me up and they would say, how many units do you have? We'll take them all. They didn't even ask the price. Maersk, they had a problem with loneliness. Such a problem with loneliness that they actually put their Japanese expats on suicide watch. So these issues, these trends that are happening in society, they need to be addressed because we need to create the living environments in which they feel best. So next we went and we spoke with the demographic itself. These people that had moved to Copenhagen, that had found a job, that were quite happy with their job, but we asked them what their needs were. What are they interested in? What kinds of amenities did they want? What are the rent levels that they were willing to pay? And it resulted in Cactus Towers. Cactus Towers is 495 apartments. It's 2 towers of 20 stories and 24 stories. The units are 33 to 55 square meters. Actually, to be honest, that's including the community spaces and everything else. They're really like about 24 square meters to 45 square meters. They're all around a central core and on the top levels of the building. The bottom 3 levels are all programmed for community. What we like to say is that you sleep in the room, but you live in the building. We have a community manager there that sets everything up. She provides a structure for them She handles the building administration, the facilities management, and then we have an app which the tenants run themselves. When I talk about life at Cactus, I'm going to talk a little bit about the apartments. You can see that the apartments are actually very efficiently designed. I love this. So we have, each unit has its own bathroom, has its own mini kitchen. It has a fold-away desk, and it also has a sofa that pulls out into a bed. All of these were designed by Bjarke Ingels' group. Now, it's semi-furnished, which makes it quite convenient for these expats to come into a place where they don't have to go out and get a bed. And it is very, very conveniently located to IKEA. IKEA is really like even connected to it. So they do have a chance to get some additional furnishing. The units are finished with kind of an oak veneer, very nice, very clean look, with this raw concrete finishing as well. And each unit has a balcony. Not all of them are as big as this one, but they each have their own balcony and space. This app is quite incredible because whereas the community manager facilitates how it runs, makes sure that everything is running smoothly, and if you have any problems, you can always contact her. This app is about making friends. There are 80 different groups on this app, from film groups to walking groups, running groups, exercise groups. There are groups that like to take field trips to go to different castles on the weekends. And you basically come home on a Tuesday, and if you don't want to be alone, you put on your running gear, and you know that at 6 o'clock, if you go down to the lobby, there will be 8 other people that will be there ready to go for a run with you. And at the end, you maybe end with getting grabbing a bite to eat or something like that. So technology is also coming in and assisting us in bringing community closer together. The spaces, the community spaces, are really quite nicely designed. This is a library cafe. And what we've also noticed is that this demographic likes to work from home. So we've also provided 3 different co-working spaces within the building. We've got kitchenettes in this big space where you can come with 6 friends and you can all cook together and then eat around the back of it. This is a very popular space. And when we were doing the focus groups, one of the guys who is an engineer, he said, when I move in there, I will spend the first 2 weeks in that common kitchen, and I will make all the friends I need. And I just thought that was such an honest, almost vulnerable comment that he made, because it just showed how concerned he was about the ability to make friends. And then, of course, a gym. Now, what's the business case? Well, I'll tell you, when I was proposing this idea to the board of Catella, they yelled at me. they told me, this is an unproven concept in Denmark. Like, how is it going to work? We had these 492 apartments lease up in 3 months via Instagram. This was a whole different demographic that looked at information in a new kind of way. When they came to us, we actually asked them, can you write a little bit of an essay or a little bit of a paragraph on why you want to live here? Because remember, this has been tailored and designed for a specific demographic and group. And so we wanted to see who really wants to contribute to this community, who wants to be active in this community. And so they would write these paragraphs saying, you know, I'm just moving to Denmark. I really want to be part of this community. It was also located in the center of the city. So it's a specific kind of mindset and lifestyle that is attracted to it. The rental level, people are falling off their seats when they see the rental level. It is double the average rent in Copenhagen. It's 535 euros per square meter on an annual basis, which is the highest in the entire country of Denmark. Nobody expected it. And it's 70 to 80 people on the waiting list at any given time. Now you think, why are they paying such high rent? Well, it's a smaller unit. And what I've also discovered, these are the people that were paying the same amount to rent a room in somebody else's apartment beforehand. Now they have their own unit. So this is what I mean when I say the mystery market. We weren't keeping track of who are all those people that are renting rooms within other people's apartments. And all of a sudden, when we opened up this product, we were swamped. So we have not just young professionals and expats, but we also have this in-betweeners group. So people who are in transition, maybe somebody who has just gotten a divorce, who needs a place to live for a year or two while they get settled. We even had an 85-year-old woman who left her husband and wanted to hang out with some younger people. She became kind of the mother of Cactus Towers. I'd like to show you this video as an end, which gives you a little bit more of a sense of the community, and it's guided by our community manager, Aminata.
What makes a place like Cactus Towers unique? I could begin and end by saying that the view says it all. But it's so much more than that. It's the different nationalities and cultures and people from all walks of life with the same desire to coexist in a co-living concept. A community just as unique as its architecture. To sleep in the apartment and live in the towers. In that way, you can say that Cactus Towers on its own is a way of living. In Cactus Towers, you have the on-site staff, Team Cactus, who are responsible for facilitating the community, while residents are responsible for creating the content. The local area offers a shopping center with 120 different stores. There's also a cinema and a harbor swimming. And within walking distance, you have Amagerfjellet, Kødbyen, and Islands Brygge. In the towers, you will find that there's a gym that you can sign up a membership for. There's also a cafe and a lot of different social areas that are also available for all the residents. So in that way, it's not an understatement to say that you have everything you need inside and just around the Cactus Towers.
If you have any questions, you're welcome to write me. Cactus Towers isn't necessarily the end-all and the be-all, but it is a reflection of taking these mega trends, taking a new demographic, listening to them, and incorporating them into the design and the concept of a building. Thank you very much.